Hello, everyone. Andrea Cox here with the healthyhaven.net and alkalizewithandrea.com. And I am so excited today because I have an amazing guest on my show today, and his name is Gerald Rogers. And I actually came across Gerald because of a Facebook post he wrote about what he wishes he would have known before marriage. And I think the post got well over several million views. And I was really excited, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to look him up on social media. And I went to try to find him, and I saw that he was actually one of my followers. And I thought, yay! I actually have the female ball strength now to ask him to be a guest on my show. And I did, and he's here with us. And I'm so very grateful and so very excited to have him on here today. We had a little trouble getting started with the technical difficulty, but we're all set and ready to go now. And Gerald, he calls himself a transformational coach, and I look at Gerald as a relationship expert, and it's not just because of the one post I saw of his, it's because of everything he writes, everything he posts, and really the way, at least the way I perceive that he lives his life. He's a father of, I believe, 4 children, right?
That's right.
4 children. And you are divorced, correct?
Yeah. Right.
For how long now?
So it's been a year and a half.
It's been a year and a half. And let me just start by thanking you for being here. I really appreciate it. I'm humbled. I mean, you've been all over the media. You've been on the Today Show. You've been everywhere. But I wanted to ask you, what prompted you to write? And I'm sure that you get so many questions about that one post, but what prompted you to write that post?
Yeah, I appreciate that. And once again, thank you, Andrea, for giving me the opportunity to come and connect with you and connect with your audience. And I really feel passionate about sharing whatever ideas and insights and inspirations I gained from my journey that might assist anyone that's listening. That particular post was interesting because for anyone that's been probably in any relationship, but especially anyone that's been through divorce or a breakup of a long-term relationship, you know how painful that is. And it was by far the most painful experience of my life. And going through divorce, it forced me to really look deep inside and figure out, okay, how did I create this? One thing I believe is we're all responsible for the results of our own life. And for me, looking at the results I was experiencing in my relationship, I had to look inside and say, okay, how did I create this? How did I get here? And how can I make sure that this doesn't happen again? And that's sometimes really hard for us to look in the mirror and to be able to acknowledge and take accountability, because it's so much easier for us to play the victim and say, well, it's her fault or it's his fault, and if only I had a different partner, then I wouldn't. Like, it's so easy for us to point the finger of blame, but there's no power in being a victim. All of our power comes in looking internally and being willing to look in the mirror and say, okay, what was my role in the relationship, and what do I want moving forward, and what do I choose to create, and how do I do that? So it was the night after my divorce was finalized. I had my kids. We were up in the condo that I had up in the mountains outside of Salt Lake, and I had put them down, and I was just sitting and kind of reflecting on that journey, because I'd been married for 16 years. I mean, it was a huge part of my life, and no one gets married thinking that someday they'll be divorced, but here I was, and I had to look at, okay, what lessons did I learn? What are the gifts that I'm taking from this experience, both being married and also the most painful experience in my life of divorce? Like, what are the gifts that I'm going to take from this to make sure that I'm a better person moving forward? And so I sat down, and it was like 1 o'clock in the morning, I just started typing. Okay, this is the marriage advice I wish I would have had, and I just imagined that I was looking in the eyes of a younger Gerald, like 5 or 6 years ago, and thinking, what advice could I have given to myself that would have made a difference? And, the ideas just flowed, and, I felt like I was really connected to a deep part of my source when I was writing it, but I didn't have any idea of what would happen with that. The next morning, I just decided that maybe there'd be 1 or 2 friends on Facebook that might benefit from it, and as I shared that the next day on Facebook, I wasn't prepared for the response by because it started getting shared, and by the end of the first day, it had been shared 1,000 times, and then by the end of the second day, 7,000 times. By the end of the first week, 70,000 times, and all of a sudden, the Huffington Post picked it up, and all these blogs and articles, and soon, the Today Show called me and asked me to be on it, and it kept being shared, tens of millions of times by people that were really relating and connecting to this idea of, how can we be accountable in our relationships in our marriages? How can we be in a space where we're contributing, we're investing in that relationship on a consistent basis to have that healthy, thriving? We all want the same thing, don't we? We all want healthy, thriving relationships, and most of us don't have the mindset, we don't have the skill set to know how to create that. And for whatever reason, through this post, I was able to communicate something that connected with a lot of people. And it's given me this beautiful opportunity of being able to connect with more people and share the deeper insights of how to live in an inspired relationship and how to live an inspired life. So that's kind of how that evolved.
And it's really beautiful. I read that very soon after a relationship of mine had ended. It was actually an engagement, and I had been engaged. Actually, I'd been engaged 3 times, but never married. And this was, it was a really sad time for me. And when I read that, I was brought to tears, and I believe I shared it on all of my pages on Facebook. And I was brought to tears within minutes, really, because it was a lot of the things you said were things that I felt were occurring with myself and this other lovely person. And so, I read it, I shared it, I read it again the next day. I think I read it every day, probably for 7 days. And so I want to thank you for writing that. It was absolutely beautiful. I want to ask you, though, you mentioned, a lot of times we blame the other person. So, and I hope I'm not getting too personal here, but did you find yourself blaming the other person, which would have been your wife in the very beginning? Did you find yourself?
Yeah, I'm totally.
Yeah.
Totally. And I'm sure she was blaming me, and we were doing this game of pointing fingers and saying, well, if you did this, right? It was I don't actually know as humans how we avoid that, because we're so wrapped up in our own ego and our own identity and our own desire to be right.
Yeah.
And so, especially when the other person's wanting something different than us, or causing pain in our life, we like to create this story in our mind that says we're the good guy, we're right, it's not our fault, it's their fault, right? And of course I went through those patterns, and my ego was really determined to be the victim for a while. And it takes a lot of humility, a lot of awareness for us to step out of it. It's okay, I'm responsible for the results of my life and my relationship, and I need to, and it's not about pointing the finger of blame back on ourselves, right? Because that's the other thing that people sometimes do, is they become the martyr and say, it's all my fault, I'm so stupid, I'm so sorry. And it's not about that. It's about saying, okay, this is my role and this is what I do. Here's the deal, we all do the very best we can from where we're at, right? And I know she did, and I know I did. We did the best we could within our relationship with where we're at, but it simply wasn't enough at that time. And so
because you didn't know.
Then shifts
because
the
you
power
didn't
back.
know. Right? We I'm sorry to interrupt, because we do the best we know how to do until we learn better. And you didn't know at that time, I'm sure.
Yeah, we all have these blind spots. And what's interesting is sometimes we know what to do better, but we've got all of these internal blocks and fears and doubts that keep us from doing what we know, right?
Yeah.
And that's the interesting thing. And even in terms of this discussion we're having about detoxing our relationships, all of that comes back to how do we detox ourselves from the inside out to allow ourselves to give and to receive love in a healthy way. And it's an interesting journey of self-awareness and personal accountability that allows us to be in that space of growth within a relationship without being tempted to go into the victim and blame patterns.
I agree with you. And, the two are so connected, what you said about detoxing our bodies. And then I think the rest follows. I think that our minds follow, and then our words follow. I know for myself and many of my clients, I've been a vegan for 11 years and a raw foodist for 9 of those years, and colon hydrotherapy, rawing, gras sha, water fast. I've done a lot of work on my body. And as I did the work on my body, my mind and my heart became clearer, and I was able to more feel from my heart and speak from a loving place of my heart, which I think so many people nowadays just don't do. Being from Ohio, I live in Southern California now, and people, there's so much eye candy, there's so much going on, there's so many social events, there's so much that it's really hard to really connect with someone on a heart-based level. And so I wanted to ask you 2 questions actually, and the first being, what have you done have you done some cleansing of the body to help you in your relationships and help you communicate more from a heart space?
So there's 2 types of clearing that I think are important. I think the physical clearing is important, and I've done some processes and some cleanses which help kind of clear my physical and spiritual connection. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really important for people to find those ways to physically detox, because a lot of times there's things that we're eating and things that we're doing in our environment that are blocking us emotionally or spiritually, and I think it's important to do that. And then the emotional clearing, it's like this emotional housekeeping that most people aren't aware of how important it is to do, to figure out what in my life is serving, what's not serving, what are the relationships that are nurturing and which of the relationships are toxic, how do I build a life, and then deep inside, how do we do the emotional clearing to heal through some of the blocks and reoccurring patterns that keep showing up in our life by diving into the personal limiting beliefs that are rooted somewhere in our subconscious. Mm-hmm. And that work is, for me, I've worked with a lot of healers and coaches and mentors, as I've been going through that and going through that breakthrough process. But I think all of those levels of clearing and healing are critical to be able to open up our heart, to be able to give love authentically and to receive it. Because most people, when we've been hurt in the past, it's easy for us to start building walls around our heart.
Totally.
To be afraid of opening up our heart and saying, totally, I choose to trust this person. Totally. I choose to open up my heart. I choose to invest in this person. I choose to love them and to receive that love, and not create a story about what it means or what it doesn't mean, or a story that says I'm not good enough or I don't deserve love. But for us to be able to really authentically say, hey, this is who I am, and I want to love you. I want to receive your love.
I totally agree. I couldn't agree more. I don't want to continually use myself as an example here, but recently I started seeing someone, and we had a little tiff before a party just the other night, and we went into the party, and for 2.5 hours we weren't in the same room. We didn't even speak, and all I wanted was for him to come and say, are you okay? I just want to check in on you. I want to see if you're okay because we had this argument. But the whole night, that didn't happen. And now, of course, he's apologizing, and he said, look, it's my old stuff from a past relationship. And I think the clearing of the body, the physical body, in a means of through what we eat, and a cleansing of the colon, I'm just going to say it. Everyone knows I'm big on that. I think it's so imperative to being able to express ourselves better. I really feel that it's almost impossible to again speak from the heart and say what we need if we're clogged up in our center. I mean, everything starts here. Everything starts in our center, in our gut, and so I do feel it's very important, to work with mentors, to work with coaches, to, see a therapist if you need to do breath work. But I also feel it's just so important to cleanse and detox the body on a regular basis, the physical body, in order to really get, through to that. But, we're all busy. You have 4 kids. I don't know how you even, when do you find the time to do everything you're doing?
Well, it's interesting. Obviously, being divorced, like my custody is, I have the kids once a week and every other weekend. So those weekends are obviously busy. Their mother, takes the bulk of the day-to-day responsibility of managing that. But it's true, like we all have so many demands on our time and so much responsibility, and we've got work and we've got this and we've got that, and the reality is we always have time for what's a priority to us. And what we spend our time on demonstrates what our true priority is. People say, "Oh, I don't have time to work out. I don't have time to do this," and then they end up finding themselves either overweight or sick or in disease or somehow. And it's like that's because you chose that your body and you weren't important. If our bodies, if we are important, we always have time to work out. We always have time to do the cleanse or do whatever else is important to us. We always have time to do what's most important to us. But most people don't take the time to really consciously decide what are my priorities, what do I choose, what do I want my life to look like. And so because of that, so many people are stuck reacting and responding to all of the different stimulus in life, and they're responding to these people's needs and those people's needs. And even within relationships, they become reactive, and they feel like they lose themselves within the relationship because they haven't made themselves a priority. And so I guess my thing that I would emphasize, especially as we're talking about detoxifying, cleansing your life, is get clear what's important to you. What does your ideal life look like? And clear out from your life those things that aren't in alignment with that. This whole cleansing process, cleanse your schedule from the things that aren't really serving you, aren't really aligning. Decommit from the commitments that you had that weren't building you up and aren't serving you moving forward. The biggest gift that we have is in being able to create the life we want is deciding what we want and then learning how to say no to everything else.
Because it's time. It's our time. One of the biggest gifts we have is our time, I think. And, I think life flies by so quickly. And I'm sure you know this having children, before you know it, they're walking, they're talking, they're driving, it's so quick. And life flies by. And I think that there's so much time wasted on Facebooking, on social media. I've been guilty of it myself, on, tweeting. Our heads are down in our cell phones constantly, and there's not enough time loving and talking and sharing a meal and just being alone and being with self and being with family and really enjoying life. So I would have to definitely agree with you about that. I wanted to ask you a question, and you can totally say no to this, and this is fine. It's absolutely fine. But I'd like to know actually what happened. What was it, a mutual decision that you got a divorce? And you can say, look, I'm not going to answer that. And that's perfectly fine.
No, it's a fair question. I know it's one that everyone likes to know because there's this natural curiosity that we all have. But the reality is it's hard to explain. We were married for 16 years, and there were so many unconscious patterns that we were both running, and it would be unfair for me to talk about the things that she did wrong, but I'm more than happy to talk about my flaws, my weaknesses.
Could you? I would love that. I would love, I'm sure all the women that are going to be watching this would love to hear about your flaws.
Yeah, this is a beautiful dirt on what it's like. Because it's so funny because, people will read a post like I wrote and, sadly they'll look at it and they'll think, who would ever divorce a guy like this, right?
What a great guy, right?
What a great guy. He's got it all figured out. This is a guy that's like humble and he knows, what a woman wants and all this. And the reality is most of my marriage I didn't. Like I really genuinely feel like I tried to be a kind, loving husband, right? That's my nature. But there were so many times where I was so self-absorbed and I was always concerned about work and I was self-employed, and so I would work and I would be completely not present for her, and I'd work from the home and like she'd be managing everything around the house and managing the kids, and I'd emerge from my office, but my mind would be completely still stuck on my real estate projects or everything else, and I didn't know how to like set that aside and be like really present for her and say, I'm here for you, babe. Like, I just want to connect. And then the other part that I noticed was huge is I was always wearing a mask. Like, I was so concerned about rejection and always seeking approval that I had to wear the mask that said, I've got it all figured out. And I had kind of adopted that when I was young to be okay with my mom, who I was always looking for emotional approval from, but it wasn't her nature to say, I love you, and it wasn't her nature to give me physical attention. And so I wore this mask where I always had a clean room, and I always had good grades, and I was always like the peacemaker, and had 8 brothers and sisters, but I had to wear this mask, and I couldn't acknowledge where I was weak. I couldn't say, oh my gosh, like, I'm really messed up here, or I'm struggling with this, or I'm struggling with that. I had to have it figured out. And so I ran that pattern in my marriage too, where I was afraid to ask for help. I was afraid to tell her, I'm struggling with this, or I'm weak with this. And I mean, just as an example, like I had this addiction to pornography for like most of our marriage, where I didn't know how to emotionally or like heal through this. I didn't know how to overcome the addiction, but I couldn't let her know. I couldn't ask for help from her, because then what if she rejected me? What if she didn't love me? What if? And I had all of these stories that kept me committed to wearing this mask. And so I was alone, and I was afraid, and I was battling the shadow, but showing up, like I have it all figured out, and it was deeply sabotaging. And as a woman, how do you trust a guy that's always hiding? How do you open your heart to someone that he's got a secret that he's not willing to share? How do you really connect with someone that's not willing to be vulnerable, that's not willing to be transparent, that's not willing to share that part of himself with you? Like, how can you trust? You can't trust, because fundamentally, even though like in my mind I was trustworthy, I wasn't, because I wasn't allowing other people to trust me.
Oh.
Does that make sense?
No, that's so beautiful. It's so beautiful that you can be vulnerable and share that with everyone. And I think so many men, they fear being able to be vulnerable in front of a woman. They fear rejection, just like you said, and they fear that they're going to get shown the door, or laughed at, or screamed at, or yelled at, or
there's so many fears we have, and it's almost like us guys, we're more sensitive than you women. Like, we are so self-conscious, and the other pattern that I ran over and over again in my marriage is, like, I allowed myself to be emasculated in that relationship, meaning because I was so sensitive and I was so seeking for love and approval, the moment, she would get upset or angry, which she should have, like, I was sometimes, like, I was completely, like, I would forget things, and I would be, like, unconscious, and I wouldn't know how to connect, and I wouldn't know how to listen. And as a man, I didn't understand how women needed to communicate, right? And so I would always internalize everything personally. And so when she'd be upset, rather than just saying, oh, I get that, tell me more about that, oh, that must be really hard, and just listening and creating that safe space for her, rather than being like a really conscious listener, I felt like I had to defend myself, or I would run away and hide, and I would put on this emotional, like, defense mechanism where I would retreat and withdraw from her and shut her out, because I was wounded, and I took everything personally, and if she wasn't happy, I felt like it was my fault. And it was this story that I had inside my mind that says, no matter how hard I try, it's not enough.
So if things weren't perfect, you took the responsibility for things not being absolutely perfect in the relationship.
Yeah, and I had it, like, if she's angry or she's upset or something's not going wrong, it's my fault as a man, and that means I'm not good enough. And so I would end up rejecting her before she could reject me. Does that make sense?
I got it. Yeah.
So
very much so.
Obviously that's super hard emotionally when you have a man that's not willing to connect, not willing to open up, not willing to be present, not willing to hear, not willing to provide that safe space for validation. A man that always jumps in and tries to fix things rather than trying to just listen, right? I mean, there's so many things I look back on and it's like, oh my gosh, I must have been so hard to be married to.
But you've forgiven yourself. Yes, you've forgiven yourself.
Yeah, I mean, of course, like, I look back and I think, I really tried hard. Like, I really did the best I could. I really did. And it's okay that things didn't work out. Like in some sense, I have this peace of knowing that everything's happened for a reason. Just trusting that God has a purpose in my life for the pain that I've been through. And fortunately for me, it's provided this gift where I can serve more people. And I know that without a doubt, divorce was part of my catalyst so that I could, write my book and that I can reach out and touch more people. And for some way, God has a perfect plan for each of us. And I felt that in my life. And so, yeah, I look back at that Gerald that was there in that marriage, and I love him. I really love him for doing the best he could. And I forgive him for all the areas that he failed, and just honor that that was a space in the journey I needed to get to be a more powerful version of myself. And I'm still evolving, and there's still things, as I start dating again, I'm like, oh my gosh, like I thought I had it figured out, but apparently not, because this is a totally different world.
Totally different. And I think that's beautiful, and I do think, and I want to thank you for sharing that with us. I think, your vulnerability is probably the reason I reached out to you. Some of the things you've written just stopped me dead in my tracks, and coming from a woman who totally speaks from her heart and will say whatever is coming from her heart in that moment. And I feel like I really allow others to be vulnerable around me, but it wasn't always the case. When I read what you write, Gerald, it's touching to my heart. So I appreciate your vulnerability today, and always with what you share. I also agree with you. I know that the one time I was hurt and an engagement broke off, and we were just really volatile, and it was this and this, and the words were going back and forth. I know I definitely demasculated him, and because I was reacting out of fear, and I think so many times we do react out of fear. And I want to know, like, how can you help the people that are watching today kind of take a step back when they're feeling violated with someone's words, or in a situation where maybe they're arguing with their mate or their potential mate, or they're in a new relationship and they don't know how to communicate? How do we stop ourselves before we're in a car screaming at the top of our lungs and it's going back and forth and we're getting nowhere?
So what I want to share is a very simple analogy and then a couple simple steps. So the analogy is this: our relationships are like this garden, and you're planting the seed in the garden, which is a new relationship. And as you nurture that relationship through spending time together and positive words and through love and affection, the more love you pour on that relationship, the more that plant begins to emerge and evolve to the point where eventually that plant yields a very beautiful fruit, the most beautiful fruit that we have in life, of really connected love and meaning. But it takes a lot of time to nurture that seed and allow it to become a tree, and it takes an ongoing investment. And the moment you stop nurturing that plant, what's going to happen to it? Well, of course, it's going to die. And this is what happens in relationships over and over again. People get married, they have this amazing courtship, and they're really invested, and then they get married, and they stop taking care of the plant. They stop dating, they stop courting, they stop, investing in the relationship, and 3 years later, like, I don't even know this person I'm married to. I don't love him. I feel like I never. Of course, because you let the plant die. You freaking killed the plant. And especially once we get critical or start focusing on the weaknesses, the moment we're criticizing or controlling or complaining, it's like pouring this toxic, waste on our plant, right? It's like pouring this poison on our plant. And the moment you call someone a name or yell at them or do something very aggressive, like, you can't take those words back. The poison's been dumped on the plant, and it takes a lot of care to get that, to heal that plant back. And so just keep that image in your mind as it relates to your relationship with your partner, and think, okay, what is the type of fruit I want to have, and how do I invest in that in a healthy way? What are the ways that I am going to nurture that? Now, here's the deal. Any relationship is going to trigger us, right? Like, and we're most attracted to that person who's going to trigger us the deepest.
Yeah.
And we don't like to admit this because we love the Disney fairy tale happily ever after, idea, but that's not how it works. And honestly, it's not how it's supposed to work, because relationships are the greatest catalyst for growth in our life. And I don't want a perfect relationship. I don't. Because that would mean that there's no growth that's happening. That the moments that we're triggered in a relationship, the more I allow the perfect relationship to be an imperfect one, where both of us are showing up in our complete humanity. Like I've got my weaknesses, and they're going to show up, and it's going to trigger her, and she's got her weaknesses, and it's going to show up, and it's going to trigger me. But in that moment, we get to identify the areas that we are healing. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And this is what's really, really important, is that we take accountability for our own emotions. So the moment you feel yourself getting triggered by your spouse, where you feel like yourself getting angry, take ownership of the emotion and say, wow, this is my emotion. He doesn't have the power to make me mad. She doesn't have the power to make me angry. He can't make me sad. No one can make us anything. That's our emotion. And it's always our choice. But unconsciously, we give other people the power to do that to us. So the first step is having awareness, to be able to recognize the emotion for what it is. The second step is accountability, saying, okay, this is my emotion, so this is my problem. And when we can do that, then we realize, and this is an important part of relationship coaching that I do, is having people recognize that when you're in a high emotional state, your reasoning is very low. So that's the worst time to talk.
Absolutely.
High emotional state just means, whoop. Sorry, I'm getting really triggered right now. I just need to press pause, because this is important for me. We can talk about this, but can we talk a bit later? I just need an opportunity to pull my head, right? Yeah. And then we can step back and say, okay, well, what do I really want? So in what do we really want, the third step is alignment. And alignment is really getting clear, okay, what is the type of relationship I want to have, and what are the words that will actually create that? What are the actions that will really create that? If I call my partner a stupid idiot, or blame her or him for this or that, is this going to really create the relationship I want? Probably not, right? That's not the type of conscious relationship that I want. So alignment is deciding, okay, this is what I want, and so this is what I need to believe, right? When we have an awareness and accountability of our own beliefs, then we can do the work of healing that. And so, for instance, for me, if, say, my partner is upset with something, and I want to withdraw and retreat, or I'm angry or whatever, I can say, wow, what's this really triggering? It's like, oh, that's my emotional wound from when I was 5 years old and I was, rejected at the playground by these other kids, right? And I can start really healing that part of me that's seeking for love and approval, because that's all of our actions are just seeking love and approval. That's all we want. But when we can really, really recognize that our wounds, our triggers, are all reflections of past beliefs, past patterns, our past fear of rejection, then we can say, okay, this is what I get to heal. What do I want, and how do I create that? And then alignment process is really focusing on nurturing the beliefs and the behaviors to create that, and then the actions then naturally shift, right? Then we always come back to, and this is my fundamental belief about anything. If anyone wants all of my relationship advice encapsulated into one message, it's simply this: always choose love. What would love do? How would love respond? When your partner's acting unconsciously, how are you going to respond? Are you going to yell back at him? No, that's not what love would do. Well, maybe sometimes love would confront them like that. I don't know. Like, love operates different in different situations, but we're always acting either out of fear or out of love. When we're acting out of our own fears and limiting beliefs and our own doubts, it's just going to create more problems and make it harder for that plant to grow. But when we actually connect with love and open up our heart and give from that space, then that relationship will thrive. But it really requires us to pause, have an awareness, take accountability, get clear on what we want, and then to act accordingly. And that space of love is where all of the magic happens, and where everything that we want evolve.
That's so beautiful. Your heart is just so open. I think you're about to find your mate. Seriously, your heart is beautiful. I agree, and I think, I have people come to me all the time to lose weight and to look better and to feel better, and then we get down to it, and it's really they're in an unhappy relationship, and they're, stuffing their face with food every night to fill a void. And I think it's so important, just as you said, to really step back when you're heated in the moment, when you're arguing or you're feeling combative or you're upset, and really take a moment to kind of gather your thoughts, because you're not going to make any sense. You're not going to be able to put a thought together. I noticed with myself for years, I would really want men to just chase me. Like that's what I was used to. I always chalked it up to, well, men have always chased me, so why not, let me see how far this one will chase me. And then even the other night, at the party, I thought, well, why isn't he coming in here? Why isn't he coming in here? And he was really playing on my strings. He was pulling those strings. And I too had a parent that was not available, and I had another parent that passed away, so at a very young age. So it's the attention. For me, it was the attention, the constant attention. Yet I gravitate towards those who, treat me with respect, yet don't overly come after me. It's actually a turnoff to me. So I really find that telling, how you said we gravitate towards the ones that trigger us. I couldn't agree with you more. And I think that's kind of a blessing in a way, because it's those triggers that cause us to move through our stuff. I am not the same woman today that I was 2 years ago. I went through probably the worst relationship ever, very brief. Got engaged at like 3 months after we met, and I mean, that rocked me into the woman I am today. I see it now as a blessing, because I'm able to relate with men on such a deep level and allow them to become vulnerable with me. But 2 years ago, completely different story. So I love that. I love that.
Yeah, and I want to just emphasize that for whatever reason, in the grand scheme of our eternal progression and who we're born and destined to become, relationships are one of the greatest catalysts for our growth and transformation. Mm-hmm. So naturally, in this big scheme of the universe and God, like evolving us to become the type of people we need to be, we're going to attract our perfect growth partners.
Our mirror. What we need to see in ourselves that we need to work on. Our mirror. I completely agree with you.
Yeah, and it's beautiful. It's beautiful when we experience life like that, because then we realize that everything that's showing up in the relationship is perfect. It's exactly what I need right now. It's exactly what I'm learning, exactly what I need to grow through. And, for the relationships that don't work out, then it's just like, okay, that's exactly what it needed to be. Like, they were my growth partner for that period, and now I've grown to a point where I need a new partner. I need something different. And one thing that I think is really important for people is that above everything else, above everything that's happening in the relationship, we're constantly nurturing the relationship with themselves. And they make that a priority, because so many people are stepping into codependent relationships because they're wanting the other partner to fill some hole inside of them. And then it just becomes a toxic environment where our needs can never be fully met, because it becomes very codependent in nature. But if we make our relationship with ourself a priority, then we realize that all relationships in our life are all a reflection of our relationship with ourselves. And the more healthy we are, the more we can allow that healthy, thriving relationship to evolve.
Let me ask you this. Can you still see me? I think I might have. Okay, great. You said something that actually triggered me. So I want to say something about it. You said, that was my relationship I needed to have at that time. Now I need a new relationship. So and I'm just asking because I'm just putting it out there, because I live in San Diego and very close to Encinitas, California, which is the hub of, and I have to bring it up, polyamory and polyamorous relationships. Are you the type of person that sees yourself that you're going to in the future go from one relationship, possibly another, or are you really looking to find that one person? I think everyone is looking to find that one person, but I think what you just said may have triggered quite a few women. Like, that was what I needed at this time. And these were the words you used. You said, but now I need something different. So are you constantly...
And I want you to look at this, and that's a fantastic question. I'm glad that triggered you, because obviously
I'm going to drink out of the jug, too, so I'm just going to...
Go ahead, chug the jug. So...
It's so bad.
The reality is where I'm at. Like, I look at my relationship with, my marriage, and it ended, and I wish it didn't. I wish that could have lasted forever. I was in it forever, and it didn't. So I'm like, okay, that served its purpose, obviously. I mean, I can't fight against the reality that the universe is giving me, right? That relationship is done. That means, for me, it served its purpose, and it taught me what it needed to, and it's complete. Like, we had our contract that we would have our lives together for a while, and when that contract was done, I got to be free, and she got to be free. And what I've experienced so far in dating is I've dated quite a few people, and none of those relationships have evolved into my soulmate relationship. None of them have evolved into this life partner that I get to spend the rest of my life with. I'm looking forward to that. I'm really, really excited to have that type of relationship that I can invest. I look at these old men and women like walking and holding hands, and I'm like, I want to be that cute old couple that's spent 30 years, 40 years together, and just like are still totally adoring each other, and I want that. But the reality is I've dated a lot of women, and they haven't been a match for me. And I haven't been a match for them. And it's nothing wrong with it. I've gained something from each of those relationships and learned, and I'm really so grateful.
Like what? What have you learned? Can you give me 3 things you've learned from 3 of your relationships in this scenario? That's all I want.
Yeah.
Then I'll let you loose.
No, I
just 3 things from 3 different...
I'll just go to one specific relationship. Like, every relationship has a gift. Like, everyone, right? There was one girl that I dated, pretty closely for almost a year. And then that ended last December. And what she taught me was the gift of seeking for joy in every moment. Like every moment I was with her, it was like we were searching for the magic in life. We were embracing everywhere from, dancing in fountains together to, hanging out under the stars and just like gazing at these constellations to, we ran a half marathon together, and we ended up, laying in the stream in the middle of the race and just like feeling like this cold water rush. Like, it was perfect, amazing, delicious moments that are available to us every moment, and she made me super present to the magic of every day. That's one thing that I gained.
That's beautiful.
The second thing I gained from her was a sense of spiritual awe of life, this connection to God, and this sense of God having this direct hand in our life. And she had this very, very beautiful spiritual nature, which made that so transparent to me. To see God's hand working in each of our lives, and the ways that we could be hands in other people's lives for God. And she was someone that celebrated with me every time I got a message from someone that said, "Hey, Gerald, you saved my marriage." And we started creating this chart of all the marriages that I had saved on my mission to save 1,000 marriages. And she was my greatest cheerleader in that. And she helped me see how I could be a hand of God in other people's lives. That's 2. That's the second thing I gained from that relationship. And a third was an appreciation for the feminine and masculine. For me to be really, really grounded in my masculine in a very powerful way that allowed her to relax, allowed her to collapse into me, allowed for me to be that safe space for her, allowed for her to clear her mind and just let me make decisions. And the things that I didn't necessarily experience in my marriage because I wasn't fully attuned to my masculine, but she gave me the space where I could step more fully into my power. And she could be in her feminine and allow me to carry her in that space. So that was another thing. I could go on. I mean, there's so many things I learned.
No, that's beautiful. She must have been a really strong woman, because usually the stronger the woman in spirit, in heart, in general nature, the more she needs a strong masculine man to really let go and relax, I feel.
Yeah, no, that's true. And I really look at our journey together and where we were at. And for us, it was never an exclusive relationship, but it was something that I gained so much from her, that I know she was in my life for a reason. And I'm super grateful for that. And, now that it's shifted and transitioned, I'm still grateful for her friendship, but it gets to be something different. And I feel like this natural progression in life, just trusting that the people that are attracted to my life are there for a reason. And for me to be open to see what that reason is. And I want a soulmate relationship with someone. I want someone that I can invest my life into. And I know she'll come. And I also trust that I'll know her when she does come. But until that time, like I'm open to allow myself to be taught through the other relationships that I experienced in the meantime. Mm-hmm. In that sense.
But okay, so that's great. And that was a beautiful example. Thank you. But you're not into open relationships. You find a mate and try to develop that one relationship, or do you? Inquiring minds want to know, Gerald. We want to know what you're into. Are you, when you meet a woman and you're into her, do you make it exclusive? Because I think it's a really beautiful thing. Answer the question first, and then I'll say what I'm going to. Then I'll say what I'm going to say. I might hit the jug again.
I'll just be like really transparent. Where I'm at right now in my journey, and all I'm saying is right now, this is where I'm at. Mm-hmm. So my journey has been about connecting and exploring life and creating perfect moments. I personally, since my divorce, I've allowed myself to have the freedom of being able to explore these relationships without commitment. And I recognize that part of it's just because this is where I'm at in my healing journey. Mm-hmm. And part of it is because I do really want freedom. I really do want to be able to connect with different people. And I'm super transparent with the women I date that I'm not ready for commitment. That's not where I'm at. Someday I will be, and hopefully someday soon, but I've had to recognize that there's a fear of commitment that I'm healing through. A fear of the responsibility, a fear of being limited, a fear of, being rejected and opening up my heart. Like there's a way, because I've been in this, dating multiple people, it's allowed me this safety and this protection that I'm still working through. And the other part is I really believe, and whether this is true or not, I don't know, because I'm still looking for it. I trust that when I meet my soulmate, that one that I'm going to commit to, and that I'm going to commit my entire life to and everything that I am to, I'm trusting that I'll know her when I see her, and maybe I'll know it instantly, or maybe it'll be after we've been dating for a few months or longer. I don't know exactly what that's going to look like, but I just trust that when the time comes for me to commit, that I'll be ready. And when it does, I'm all in.
I think you'll know. I think you'll know immediately. I think you'll know immediately. Whether it'll work or not is a different story, but I think you'll know immediately. No, that's really great. I'm glad you answered that honestly. I myself took a 7-year vow of celibacy, and then I'm on a 2-year vow of celibacy right now. I was with someone for 10 years, broke it off, took 7 years, wasn't planned. But I wanted to ask you, because I never planned to be celibate for a certain amount of years. And I date and go out and date men, and I make it very clear that, it's nothing's going to happen, of course, to that degree. But I want to know, have you ever tried to be alone for a while? Have you ever kind of cut yourself off from females to kind of dive deeper into what's really inside Gerald? Have you ever done that? Have you experienced that yet? Because it's a really powerful thing that really gets you in touch with your masculinity.
Yeah, and I believe that. I think it's important. And it's interesting. Last summer, I felt like this real call for me because I was, sometimes I've used dating as a way to distract myself, right? And filling up every evening or every moment with other people, other things. And so last summer I was like, oh my gosh, like my life is too crowded and too congested, and I felt like this call to, just like you're saying, like separate myself. And so I fully moved up into the mountains and ended the relationships, the dating relationships that I was in, just to give myself some space of time to connect with God and connect more deeply to myself. I wasn't to the point where I wasn't, engaging socially or connecting with people. But it was a sharp contrast that I needed in my healing journey. And I would say, in some weird way, even the last 6 months of my divorce were kind of like that for me, where I felt like I was completely alone and really diving deep into my healing and figuring out who I was as a man. And so I think it's really important. I think it's important that we escape the need of being around other people enough to find ourselves, so that when we do engage in a relationship, we're doing it from a space of healthiness. And I've got lots of friends that, stopped dating at all for a year or 2 years or 5 years, or I know someone that didn't date at all for like 7 years before she felt like she was ready to start dating. So I think different people heal differently now. I think for some people, having this completely being alone is an important part of their healing journey. And I think for other people, part of the healing happens through being in relationships.
And I think there's a big difference between being alone and not dating, and being celibate but dating. And really getting to know someone's heart before you allow them to get to know your body. I think there's a lot of nowadays, and I'm just going to be blunt, where sexual energy is exchanged, like a handshake. I think there's a lot of beauty in really holding back and really getting to know someone's heart, because when you allow a man to get to know your heart before he gets to know your body, it's really hard for him to walk away when things do get rough.
And what's also true is the man that demonstrates that sort of patience and honors you for where you're at right now.
Exactly.
And isn't just into your body and doesn't just want you for sex. That man that demonstrates that, I'm interested in all of you. I want to know your heart, and I would love to make love to you sometime, but that's not why I'm here. That allows the relationship to be more full and more sustaining. There are guys that's what they want. They just want sex, and that's it. That's the surface. And if that's where the woman's at too, like, I'm not here to judge that. But for a long-term sustainable relationship, I think it's super valuable for you to allow that connection to evolve emotionally before it does physically, because there's something also with men where if they get what they want too easily and too quickly, they lose interest. And I know a lot of women who experience that. They feel like he wants sex on the first date, and so I gave it to him, and then all of a sudden he's not interested in seeing me again. It's just, there's this weird psychology in the mind of a man, where the more the woman requires the man to be patient, the more engaged and interested the man is long term, and the more sustainable that relationship is long term.
Yeah, and
we could talk about these things for a long.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to say, the last engagement I had, we were engaged before we slept together. It was like 5 months, and we were engaged, and we hadn't been intimate. So it's a really beautiful thing. But it's also a beautiful thing to make love to a man or a woman that you're madly in love with and passionate about too. On that note, I adore you. What is your website? Where can people find you? Do you have a YouTube channel? Where are you at?
If you go to GeraldRogers.com,
okay,
that's my primary blog, and you'll have access and link there to follow me on Facebook or anything there. There's a specific website that I set up to share advice on relationships, and that's epic-marriage.com.
Nice.
A lot of great articles and resources there for people that are really looking for understanding of relationships, and there's a lot more we're going to be investing in terms of energy of putting forth content there. And I would love for anyone that's there to go there and connect with me. And if you can make it to one of my workshops, I've got this 3-day breakthrough event called Live Big, which will change your life.
Where's it at? Where's it going to be at?
So I hold it in Salt Lake City. It happens 4 times a year. And it's 3 days of unbelievable transformation to help you discover who you are, understand what your purpose is, and understand how you can create a life that you're passionately excited about.
I love that. You are an amazing man, and your children, I can't wait to see how creative and amazing they're gonna turn out. And wow, thank you. I'm humbled with gratitude, and I'll definitely share your links, and I'll put the links below this video. And I appreciate your time.
I appreciate that so much. I feel inspired. Like, for anyone that is interested in coming to Live Big, I'm going to do something crazy. If you go to livebigseminar.com, the event is typically $997.
Okay.
But just for people that are here, like, I want to give them like a crazy discount so they can travel wherever in the country. So I'll let you come just as my guest at cost, which is just $97. Which, I mean, it just covers cost, but it makes it so that you can financially, make it from, like, we have people that fly out all over the country. So if you go to livebigseminar.com, use the code VIP, all capitals, capital V, capital I, capital P, and you'll get that code, and you can come to the next one. And I would love to do that just as a gift for your.
We'll definitely embed that link, and we'll embed that code. Thank you. You're amazing.
Thank you so much for the inspiring and fun interview, and for everyone that's been listening. I'm so grateful that you would choose to invest this time with us. And just remember, you got one life to live. So live big.
Right. Thank you so much. Alrighty. Be well. Okay. Thank you so much. You freaking rock. You are a rock star.